I want to talk to you today about human thermal imaging, or in other words, temperature scanning. And we're going to talk about passive systems or active systems. So let's talk about temperature scanning first, right? So elevated body temperature is one of the ways that our body fights infections, right? And with coronavirus, SARS-CoV-2 virus that causes COVID-19 disease, about 80% of the people, it looks like about 80% of the people have fever when they're having an active infection. So that means that 8 out of 10 have a fever. It also means that 20% don't have a fever, and that's one of the problems with active fever screening for detecting illness. But 80% of people seem to have fevers, and that makes it a fairly useful screening tool. Now, when you talk about human body temperature, our temperature, everyone says, oh, the temperature is 98.6. Well, that is actually an average of a big series of body temperatures that were measured many years ago. And the ranges go from about 97, a little bit below 97, up to somewhere around 99. And the average is about 98.6 Fahrenheit or 37 degrees Celsius. The cutoff for fever, the average cutoff for fever, the number that we actually use is 100.4, right? So body temperature 98.6 on average, temperature 100.4. Now I, for example, run a body temperature that's usually lower. My body temperature is usually 97 degrees, and when I get to be 99 or 100, I'm actually sick. So it's a little challenging when we talk about human body temperature, but with 80% of the people with active COVID disease having a temperature, it's a reasonable thing to do to measure people's temperature when you're screening them before they enter a building or a place, an indoor venue. So how do we actually do temperature screenings? And we've been doing this for a while now. There was temperature screenings that started in airports with SARS in 2002. There were temperature screenings around the world, again in airports and points of entry with MERS. And now we're talking about temperature screening for large numbers of people for COVID-19 as we start the recovery process. So passive systems are thermal cameras, infrared cameras that scan big, wide populations of people. So as I go past this, the camera zeroes in on my face, it recognizes I'm a human face, and it then measures my temperature. Right, and some of the sophisticated artificial intelligence systems can measure many people walking through an airport, and it looks at their temperature. One of the downfalls of a screening system like that, a passive system that doesn't require any human intervention, is that it measures the difference in infrared temperature between the person and the surroundings, which makes these type of systems difficult to use in outdoor venues. Because if it's a warm summer day and the grass and the ground is all 98, 95, 96 degrees because it's a hot summer day, the camera will have a really hard time telling the difference between my body temperature and the infrared energy I give off and the infrared energy coming off the grass and the ground. So these are made to be used in indoor temperature-controlled, air-conditioned spaces. That's why you'll see them inside airport terminals and bus terminals and ports and buildings. Not so good outside. Now they do make smaller thermal imagers that look like a big 35 millimeter camera or SLR camera. And those are a little bit better because they temperature average, and they try and you scan about 10 people, you get the average infrared temperature, and then it compares everybody to that. But again, these are made for mostly indoor spaces. The other type of scanning is actually active scanning. And active scanning uses a handheld infrared sensor. There are lots of these. Some of them are made for human temperature measuring, some of them aren't, and we'll talk about that in a second. So how does this work? Basically, you get within 3 or 4 inches of somebody's forehead you squeeze the trigger, and then you read the temperature. Now some of these don't have such great accuracy, and you need to be careful with both systems. You need to be careful on looking at the specs, because, for example, we looked at a whole bunch of these, and this particular one is plus or minus 5 degrees Celsius. So that makes this one pretty much not so useful for humans, because with a plus or minus 5 degrees Celsius, I could have a raging temperature and still show up normal. So, for example, my temperature right now was reading as 93 degrees. 93, I'm not 93, I'm not cold. I'm 97 probably, because I'm feeling pretty normal. But because of the accuracy difference of plus or minus on this, I'm showing a low temperature. It happens the other way as well. I could have 102 and show up as 97 with this one. So this is not a great one. There are particularly good ones. We recommend this one. I'm going to come close to the camera here. This one, made by X-Tech. And the reason I like this one, and by the way, we ordered 300 of them. They're really hard to get because everybody's ordering them. And there's like a 6-week backlog. So if you want one of these, you should drop us a note. Just go to drstu.org, and where it says submit question, just write that you'd like to get a thermal scanner. We like those particular ones because they're rugged, and also they have a accuracy of plus or minus 0.5, so half a degree Fahrenheit or 0.3 degrees Celsius. Very accurate. They're FDA approved. We like them. They're a little more pricey than some of the other ones you can get. They're about $250, but we really like those ones for scanning for large numbers of people. You have to actually point the thing at each individual person. So the difference between the passive one, which can see many people walking by, and the active version is that with the active version, you have to point it at somebody's forehead from about 3 inches away. So that's the two types of scanning systems. Again, because 80% of the people have a fever when they have active COVID-19 disease, this is not a bad idea to have this as one of the ways to recover after COVID-19. This is only part of your plan, though, because the question is, what do you do if you get somebody that reads a high temperature? Well, these are only screening devices, both the active and the passive. You then need to actually take their temperature with a thermometer, which is the most accurate. And you also need to have a response capability. What do you do with a customer that comes in that has an elevated temperature? How do you handle them? What do you do with your venue? What do you do with the staff that took care of that person? So it's all part of a bigger plan. We can actually help you write those plans. That's what we do. My company, Intelligent Crowd Solutions, we help people write plans. But you can use us, or you can actually write your own plan. But make sure that screening is not a standalone thing. It's a screening process, but it needs to be part of a larger process that you have for your company. If you have a question you'd like me to answer, please go to drstu, drstu.org, and send us your question, and we'll answer them in the next YouTube video. Thanks so much, and we'll see you tomorrow.